my name is Brianna, and this is the Mama Knows Not a podcast. Today we have a special guest. Her name is Joanne. She runs an organization called Ability Tree First Coast, and it helps provide support and resources to children and their families who have disabilities. So welcome to the show, Joanne. Thank you so much for being here. Now let's dive right into my first question. Yeah, what are some misconceptions about children who have disabilities?
So I think it kind of almost starts from the womb. There are times when doctors will say, well, your child will never be able to, and then fill in the blank, something that a child would typically be able to do. Maybe it could be something like they'll never be able to walk. They'll always depend on you. And that kind of goes into this whole concept of a child being a burden on the family. And that's a dangerous place to be sharing that with potential, new parents or parents that are getting a diagnosis even later on. It doesn't even have to be something from when the child is first born. It can even be in preschool, school. Even we are discovering that people are being diagnosed as into late teens, even early adulthood. So the idea of being a burden is a misconception, or they're so different than my child is another misconception, that they're so different, or that they're always happy. That tends to happen a lot with Down syndrome. Individuals with Down syndrome, you'll always hear like, oh, they're just so happy and so friendly. I promise you that is not always the case. Ask any parent with a child with Down syndrome. They have a full array of emotions. And you will see every aspect, just like you would for any kid. And the other one that I would think for a misconception is the idea that they can't have a full life. There will always be something missing, and that is terribly untrue. So, when people start to think that in any of these facets of any of these misconceptions, what they're doing is they're minimizing the value of that person as a human being. And
So in your experience, your son has Down syndrome. So tell us about that. How has he surprised you in these different things or these misconceptions? And how has he just been like, oh, he can do anything, or anything is possible, just like another kid who might not have Down syndrome?
Right, sure. So my son can read. He's at a first, second grade level of reading. So we read a lot of Dr. Seuss books because of just the rhythm and pattern that they have. He's able to do double-digit addition and subtraction. And these are things that when he started reading, blew me away, because his I forgot, it was kindergarten, first, second, something like that. The teacher mentioned to me like, oh, he's reading such and such, and had videotaped him and sent me a video of him. I was like, I had no idea he could read, because for at home, he has no interest, or he had no interest in reading. It was like, yeah, this is home. This is playtime. This is not me having to educate myself or something. I don't know.
Right.
But so as soon as I discovered, like, no, the kid can read, you better believe I was like putting books in front of him and making him do it rather than me just reading to him. I mean, that was something that I've always done, is read to him. But then the tables turned and starting to make him read more. And so now it's become more traditional for us, and he's doing great with that. He's able to navigate electronics, no joke. Hand him the phone and he can make it happen. Hand him a tablet. He's even figuring out how to actually get on a laptop and start doing things. And he's 11 years old, and he knows how to spell important words to him. So he has learned how to spell those important words, and he will put them in, like YouTube. He can YouTube anything.
Jeez.
In fact, he's created how-to videos We have
Oh my
found them on
gosh.
our phone. He has taken our phone when we don't realize it, because when we're kind of flipping through our phone, we'll see that he's done how-to videos where he literally sets up the phone and will start like, this is how you brush your teeth. And he starts getting like
Oh my
everything
gosh.
out, and he's showing you how to do it. So yeah, so those are some
So
pretty awesome things.
that is so cool to me, like the fact that kids, I mean, they're so surprising. And we've talked about this a little bit before.
Yes.
I liken everything to like a baby and to a toddler. Like to me,
Hmm.
every kid like that, regardless of how you come out of the womb. Like you're all babies, you're all going to be toddlers, and you never know what a child is capable of until you
Absolutely.
let them try. And I just think
Yes.
that is fascinating. Like here, he's found his little niche. Like maybe
Yeah.
those videos can help other kids. Like that's
Yeah.
awesome. They can
Yeah.
help Declan because he definitely doesn't brush his teeth. Like that is amazing.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
um, so what do you wish people understood about differently abled individuals?
I think one of the first things I would say is that a person with a disability or differently abled person wants to be treated like everybody else. They don't want to be pointed out as different. They don't
Mm-hmm.
want to be recognized as using a wheelchair. They don't want to be recognized as being deaf or blind or have an intellectual disability. They want to be engaged with just like their peers and anybody else
Mm-hmm.
that you'd be encountering. And I think it's really important for us to speak directly to those individuals, even if it's them being a toddler, even into adulthood, if they are able to speak or not speak, if they're able to maintain eye contact or not. It's just about the dignity of the person and being able
Mm-hmm.
to communicate with them, even if you never get a response, and talking to them and then pause as if they were going to respond. And of course, if they don't respond at that time, then talk to their caregiver, their parent, whoever
Mm-hmm.
that they're with. But I think society tends to strip away their rights and their dignity at just a basic human level a lot of times, because we think they're just not capable of understanding.
Yeah.
And while, okay, so let's be real, there are some that have a very, very low IQ where they're not
Mm-hmm.
able to process or engage, but that doesn't mean that they don't understand tone of voice. They don't understand nonverbal
Mm-hmm.
interactions, those type of things. I mean, it's still there. They can tell if someone cares about them or not, and they're going to respond to that. And
100%. I think
yeah,
that's so important. Just on a human level, we understand nonverbal cues sometimes more intrinsically than
yeah,
verbal cues because they're
yeah,
so responsive, like they're so reactive. Like you have an immediate
yes,
reaction to things,
yes,
and sometimes when we plan out our responses, we can choose our tone and choose our words in a much,
yes.
I'll say, superficial or like kind of like to placate a situation, and kids pick up on that. Little
Oh, yeah, they
kids,
do.
children are so intuitive, and I like what you're saying about dignity. My brother was diagnosed with MS, so it's also touching on disabilities later in life in his late 20s. And he was fine for several years and took a hard, turn downward. And that ability to do things like, drive, and all these, or walk
Hmm.
properly, now he's walking with a cane. And you can see the frustration in his face as a man. Like he doesn't want the help, but he needs the help.
Yes,
And
yes, yes, yes.
that level,
Hmm.
that dignity. I, when you're talking about that with a kid, it's like if you don't give them the same respect as their peers or someone that it goes about life the same way you do, and let's be honest, we all do life
Hmm.
differently. So
Right.
better. Kids know that. They know when you're even inadvertently like singling them out. And so
Yeah.
for on
Oh,
that
yeah.
note, how somebody like me, okay, so my son doesn't have a disability, but I think it's really important that he engages with people of all shapes, sizes, abilities, colors, backgrounds. I think that's really important. So
Yeah.
for me as a parent who might not have a child with disabilities or a disability, how can I have a productive conversation, and how can I be more constructive with our engagement to a community or a person who might be differently abled?
Absolutely. So I think um, normalizing the word disabilities. I think it's a lot of times it tends to be this elephant in the room where people, it's very apparent for some. I mean, now there are invisible disabilities, which a lot of times you'll see it through behaviors or tics that they may have, or the way that they're processing or their social interactions. But I think us being able to just normalize it, allowing and encouraging questions is so important. Now, of course, asking tactfully, but I think being able to allow them to ask questions. I know that there'll be kids that will ask, and even within my family, like Josiah's cousins, like little cousins, they will make comments or they'll ask questions such as, why can't I understand him? That's a brilliant question. That's a fantastic question. And the thing is, like, I normalize it, and I can see, I mean, my family's getting a little bit better about it, but I could see the parents almost cringe, like, oh, you don't ask that. Like, that's so rude. No, it's not like out of the mouth of babes. Like, kids are asking because they're curious. Like, they're the ones that are going to be able to be educated and it help, move things forward because of them being able to ask that, and I think so it's kind of a twofold. So as a parent with a child with disabilities, I think when you're approached by anybody, kid,
Mm-hmm.
adult, whatever, be receptive to their questions because they're curious. They want to know. They may not be the most tactful at it, but understand their heart in it, and then show them the appreciation that they've taken an interest, and then answer their questions. And then, of course, on the other side is, for you, encouraging your child, say, if they come to you, because they'll probably come to you first, like, I don't understand Josiah, I don't understand him. Well, that's a great question. Why don't you go ask Joanne and say, how, and then maybe even prompt them, like, ask, how come I can't understand him? And then almost like a role playing, and then allowing him to go and ask the question for that.
I love that. And I think that's really interesting. If you ever watch like kids on a playground, if there's one who like say, someone like hurt their foot or whatever, and it's a perfect stranger will be like, oh, she hurt her foot or he hurt his foot. That's why he can't walk. Like kids, once they understand something too, or know that someone might need help, they can be very protective and they could be total
Yes.
strangers, but it's almost like, oh, you hurt your foot or whatever it is.
Right.
They
Right.
know and can connect
Yes.
the dots. They're like, oh, I got this. Let's go play, or let me help you to go play.
Right.
That just opens the door for more community and more
Yeah.
relationships and
Yeah.
more inclusion. Like, I think that inclusion is a really important thing, especially for our children,
Yeah.
and open arms. So that's why I was like, I want to talk to Joanne because
Yeah.
she'll help me understand something that I'm,
Right.
and we can always learn, right?
Oh, absolutely. For sure.
What about like, how have strangers or people in your life surprised you with the way they engage with you and your children?
So I think overall, it's been a positive experience. I don't know if it's because of the community we live in, the people I'm just naturally surrounded by, but I would say overall, people have been really positive in their responses. Josiah tends to talk to everyone, and you can't understand half of what he's saying. So we're walking at a restaurant and he's telling people like, bye, I'm going to go play now. And people are just smiling and waving to him,
So
acting
sweet.
interested, or maybe, I say acting, but they're coming across interested in him. They're smiling. They think it's hilarious. Um, so it's been pretty good. I will say there's been some some moments, I think the medical community and them not being educated on how to present a diagnosis is definitely a problem. I know that that was kind of our story and what happened when we were told that Josiah had Down syndrome or suspected that he had Down syndrome right after he was born. And even providing resources, they don't have that at their fingertips, which you would
Hmm.
think that as a medical professional, they would make sure they have everything
That's
in
crazy.
line for it,
Yeah.
but they don't. And I think once again, it
Huh.
goes into that level of comfort. Like, are you comfortable or not? You know, the nurse, the head nurse that came in, I had a cesarean, so I'm laying flat on the ground, flat on the table, waiting for my toes to move because I'm not allowed to. I wasn't able to go to my room until I could like start moving my feet.
Yeah.
Well, um, my husband comes in, he has this like look in his face, and like when your
Mm-hmm.
spouse has a look, they don't have to say anything, something's up. And so, but he was trying to play it off, and I knew there was something going on. The nurse comes walking in, bubbly, and is like, "Hey, did your husband tell you that your son might have Down syndrome?" And I'm like, "Wait, what?" And so I'm looking at my husband. He is tormented, and this is how I'm told. Now, I think it's because of her level of discomfort. So she was trying to make it sound positive, which, okay, so I appreciate. It's not like she came in like, I am so sorry, Joanne, to tell you, because there has been stories that I've been told by other parents where probably the most insulting comment I've ever heard was a doctor literally said to the
Oh
parent,
no.
get ready for this. You're going to get infuriated because like I
Oh
still get
gosh.
like worked up. He said, "Well, if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, then it's probably a duck." And that's how he broke the news that their child had Down syndrome.
What does that even mean? Like, it's a child, not like a
Uh-huh.
a mutant. You know?
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah,
like
like take a moment. Yeah, I mean
it's not like a
so
Teenage Mutant Ninja
that's a struggle.
Turtle.
I mean, and then there's other medical professionals that totally get it. And I will say probably a lot of those medical
Interesting.
professionals, because even within the community, we're like, okay, what doctor should we go to? Those type of things. It's because they've personally been impacted in one way or another. Maybe their sibling, maybe an extended family member, or they
Mm-hmm.
grew up with someone. So then they seem to have better etiquette, I guess, maybe on how to share that kind of information. But I know that with kids, when Josiah
Wow.
was much younger, it was a little bit more of an even playing field. But as the gap started to increase, where the kids his age were obviously advancing at a typical rate, and he's still behind in his abilities and hitting his milestones. Um,
Mm-hmm.
as that started happening, some kids were kind of picking on him because
Ooh.
they knew he couldn't communicate effectively to be able to say anything to anyone. So we did have a couple of those incidents, but those were, like I said, just very few and far in between. Predominantly, kids have been very positive with him
That's
and
awesome.
include him in what they're doing, even if they don't really understand what he's trying to say. So,
What are you saying?
yeah,
That's
yeah.
okay. I mean, I don't understand what most people are saying either. I'm like,
Right,
what?
right.
Like, especially my
Yeah.
toddler and my husband. I'm like, what? Can you guys slow
Yeah,
down?
yeah. Slow down, say it again.
My
I tell my
brain
husband,
does
I
not
mean, I tell my
process
son all
that.
the time, like, articulate your words. And he knows what that means. Like he knows what articulate means. And that was the other thing, like earlier you were asking, like, what do people need to know about people with disabilities is like set expectations high. Don't
Mm,
settle just because they have some sort of disability. Still set the expectation high because they will always rise up to the challenge because they want to prove
mm-hmm.
themselves just like any other person typically wants to prove themselves. And so
That's a
we do
good
that
point.
with Josiah. Like we use regular language. We don't dummy it down for him. We expect him to understand what we're saying and the
Mm-hmm.
vocabulary that we use even. So,
I love that. I think
yeah.
that if you don't give him a chance, how are you ever going to know what he's capable of? I mean, I,
Absolutely.
I look at that like in just in life in general, and I
Yeah.
that I don't understand about people sometimes is that, like I say, I don't understand things sometimes. I don't, and I don't have any known medical conditions or things that might
Right.
cause some kind of, neurological breakdown or whatever. And
Yeah.
I struggle. So when I see that other people like shy away from subjects or don't want to include people who are different, I don't get it, because it's like we're all just figuring life out. And some of us,
Absolutely.
right? Like some of us are at, one part of the race, and other of us just might need some help. And I think what really showed me that was becoming a mom. And like,
Mm.
you can't help it when you're a parent, like everybody compares their kid. Oh, well, so-and-so's doing this. Oh, well, so-and-so's doing that. Oh, my
Yes.
jump up and down, and my kid knows the ABCs, and my kid can spell their name, and they're 2.5. And you're like, my son goes down the slide, right? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't.
I
So
know.
you're
Yeah.
like, okay, does this matter? Like, I know Declan's just learning how to say his ABCs, and I didn't teach him. I sent him to a preschool because those are things that I am not good at. And I'm like, dude, well, other kids are doing this, and he's 3, and I'm like, you know what? He's gonna get there. Like, he can't
Right.
do thumbs up, but you know what? He's gonna get there, right? Like,
Absolutely.
he's on his own course.
One of the most um, influential statements that was said to me was when Josiah was just maybe 3, 4 months old, was no one's going to ask when he's 18, no one's going to ask when he was potty trained. No one's going to care when he
It's
was
true.
able to blow bubbles or, any of those things. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. The milestones, to their best of their ability, will be hit when it's appropriate for them to be hit. And, we put so much pressure on ourselves as moms when they're little to rise up. Now, once again, set expectations, but when we set unrealistic expectations, then what we're doing is we're having these unplanned consequences, like what that's going to look like down the road. Perfectionism,
Yeah.
self-doubt, anxiety, these other types of things start to develop as they get older because of the demands that were put on them that were not even within their developmental milestone yet.
Right.
Like, I mean, developmentally, your brain can only do so much at a certain point in time.
It's
Now,
true.
once again, there's variations, right? I mean, there are the 2.5-year-olds that are like playing Bach on, on the piano,
Amazing.
but those are savants. Those are like not the norms, and that's fantastic. That's amazing. But for a kid to be able to get their hands dirty in finger paint and just draw a Picasso, that's just as amazing.
Yeah. I mean, we have a scrapbook of Declan's artwork, and my husband's like, oh, we got to keep everything. I'm like, they all look the same. Like, stop.
I know. Right.
We can have one of everything. Okay.
Yes, yes.
Oh, what have you learned most from your children?
Wow. Um,
I know, loaded, right?
it's like, yeah, it's a lot. Like I would say that they showed me that they can truly rise up to the challenge. That when I had set expectations for Josiah, but when I realized that his teachers were setting expectations that were even just a little higher than mine, I was like,
Wow.
oh, well, let's do this then, And so, like, I'm all about like, self advocacy and accelerating, like, just making sure that they're able to reach that fullest potential. You mentioned it before, like you never know what they're capable of until they're presented with the opportunity.
Hmm.
And so recognizing like, wow, my kids really can rise up to the challenge when it's presented in
Yep.
front of them. And another thing they taught me, and it actually kind of started teaching me about myself and recognizing myself as, you know, kids in general, special needs or not, they desire consistency, structure, and boundaries. Um, I
That is
think
so true.
we tend to think like, oh, I just want them to freely express themselves. I want them to fully blah blah blah, whatever. No, no, no. they're not at that place in their lives yet where they can handle that. And when there isn't those boundaries put in place, when there isn't that structure or consistency, then they feel like they're floundering. And then when they start feeling like they're floundering, well, now they're grabbing at anything, and that's when you start seeing behaviors. um, when you see that they are, almost rising up against you, because they're like, I don't, because they don't know what the expectation is for them. They don't know what the boundary is. They don't know that
Yes.
I'm not allowed to push mom beyond this point, because when I do, ugly mama comes out. And so I now know this is my line unless I'm really interested in picking a fight that day, that type of thing. And being consistent in that, because kids are going to, and I think we talked about this when we were last together, like they're going to keep pushing things
Yes.
until you, until either you break or they break. And as a parent, we can never break. We need to be the one that's going to have that absolute, so that they recognize, because when they do become adults and they're engaging with their professors or their bosses, or anyone, even their future spouse, they have to understand that there are boundaries and that they can't just get anything that they want. And so that was one of the other things that I found. And of course, now being in the world of disabilities, I realized that the world is much more diverse than my little bubble pre Josiah.
Right.
So
I love that, though. I think it's a really good point too. Like, we all want our kids to be like happy and like give them what they want, but I've been reading a lot about how the lack of disappointment has actually a negative effect on kids. And I read a bunch of studies on a separate note and tangent. Like, there's it's kind of off topic, but like I have
go ahead.
a stepsister who committed suicide. And so now with this pandemic happening, you see all the kids as young as like 8 years old committing
Yes.
suicide. And a lot of them, like what mental health experts are saying, and I wish I had a study to reference, but are saying that a lot of it comes down to not knowing how to deal with their emotions
Yes.
and dealing with disappointment. And so what you're saying, it like resonates with me, because I've lost someone that way. And
Yes.
if you don't know what it's like to fall down and stand back up, if you don't have some kind of perseverance, if you don't fail in life, how do you learn anything if there's no boundary? Like,
Right.
sure, Declan, you might want chocolate for breakfast, sure, Josiah, you might want to run and say hi to everybody, but like, not everybody, you can't have chocolate every day, and not everybody wants to say hi to you, like,
Right. Oh,
and
absolutely.
if you don't tell your children that here's the line, don't cross it, sure, once in a while they're going to cross it and they're going to hurt themselves. That's okay. Like, they need to know that there's a boundary. Like, don't jump off the slide. It's not a good idea.
Right.
So, it just boggles my mind, I guess as parents, we want to keep our kids in a bubble and keep them protected. But again, it goes back to this theme that we've been saying. It's like, if you protect them, how's Josiah ever going to live on his own? Like, sure, be that support. But I'm sure you and your husband, your daughter is a teenager, right? She just wants to be an ESE teacher, and she's going to college soon and do her own studies. So you might want your life, a little bit more of your life back, get the kids out of the house one day, right? Isn't that what we're supposed to do as parents, is guide them through?
Right.
Then let them free, So if you don't give Josiah that and I don't need to tell you this, but if you don't give him that opportunity to try and be an independent human, you might, how's he ever going to learn?
Absolutely. Well, sure, absolutely. And and the thing though too is, for special needs parents, I've seen both extremes, where you have a parent who is has the expectation that their child with disabilities is going to do anything and everything that any other average child in their peer group would do, when they literally are not able to, because of maybe their intellectual level of abilities, that type of thing, to the other side, where my kid doesn't need to do anything because he can't. And, and I've worked with young adults with disabilities that don't even understand how to press a button on a microwave. Um, like it literally has a popcorn button, but to even know how to pop popcorn, right? And
Yeah.
so and being able to find that balance of, where does your child truly lie? Like keep testing the boundaries, keep pushing them farther, but then also recognizing like, okay, this is their maximum ability. So now let's work within that. Now, what other things within that, that scope are we able to help you succeed
Right.
in?
That makes sense to me. Like, I mean, again, just taking back to like any kind of parenting, like, I feel like they might not be able to do it today, but they might be able to do it tomorrow.
Sure.
Like, don't kids need repetition, like just in general? Some
Yes, yes, yes.
more repetition than others. That's just my perspective. And
Hmm.
what do I know? I don't know. Not
Yeah.
much, I feel like. And then when it comes to parenting, do you find that you and your husband are like, I mean, your kids are older than mine, so I find that Dominic and I struggle. Like, he'll do one thing, and I'm like, that's not what we talked about. Like, we got to be on the same page. At this point, are you and your husband like pretty congruent, like in your parenting approaches, or do you guys kind of differentiate or differ
Yeah.
depending on the subject matter?
I think um I think we've definitely found more of a flow now. But what we've had to do is just have those conversations beforehand, like anticipating, like, okay, so Jasenia is going to be hitting preteen. Are we going to allow her to do this, that, and the other? Or when are we
Oh,
going to, like, coming up, like having a game plan ahead of time so that when the time comes, we're already on point with what we're supposed to do. Doesn't always work like that, especially when you're in the moment. Sometimes
yeah.
it
Oh
doesn't work
crap.
like that. My husband's Puerto Rican and he gets very passionate, I should say, about things sometimes.
Understand that.
And whereas I'm much more just the like, um, even to like um, type A systematic, like, let's just follow the plan type of thing. And
I love it.
so yeah, so those type of things do get kind of different, but I think there's been this natural ebb and flow of us taking lead at the right moments and us tapping out at the right moments. We actually created a code for when either one of us were
I love
kind
that.
of almost getting to a point where it was getting unhealthy with our kids. Like if I'm getting my daughter and I butt heads a lot. I mean, just it is what it is, right? So we butt heads sometimes, and so there's times when if that's happening and it's not really going anywhere, our code word is "I love you." Like because my kids are not going to ever question that, but I'm going to know that if I'm in the middle of fussing with my daughter and my husband goes, "Hey, Joanne, I love you," like in the middle of all that, I'm going to know, okay, I need to stop now. And so then I
That's
will.
awesome.
And so I'll walk away. And so that's kind of how we tap in and tap out is we have this kind of code phrase that's not terribly bizarre. Like, with my son, we actually use the word llama because
I love
we,
it. It's so
we,
cool.
we knew he would have no idea what that meant. But like when I am, um, one thing, when you're correcting your child or when you are providing any kind of discipline or behavior modification, whatever that may look like, it's really important that that person that started it finishes it with them, because there
I
needs to
like
be
that.
consistency. Otherwise, if they see, oh, mom keeps walking away every time I get her to this point and dad has to step in, well, now it's like, oh, so he or she will push until that point then to get the other parent involved. So that's why, whoever is addressing the behavior, if the other parent wants to walk in and it's not quite time yet to tag team it, we just simply say llama, and you just know that don't step in yet. It's not time.
I think that's brilliant. I mean,
Yeah.
parenting is hard, and we all
Yeah,
have
it
like
is.
I was just telling you before we recorded, like haven't slept, so I'm like short fuse like all the time, and it's like how
Yeah.
I almost find that I'm more conscientious of my behavior when I am exhausted because I don't want to be short or,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever it is than when I'm not tired. But you just never know, like, where your line, you don't even know where your line is half the time. Like, I feel like I don't. And it's like, but what
Yeah.
you're saying is true. Like, sometimes my husband will be like, why do you help me? I'm like, because you have to do it. You have to come to
Yeah.
kind of, what's the word I'm looking for?
There has to be resolution to that
There you go.
situation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like you have to do that with him. I can't always be the one who like comes in and makes it better or is the, I don't want to say disciplinary, but always like redirects him or,
Right.
definitely times where I'm like, okay, Declan, let's have a temper tantrum in your room by yourself so you don't hurt
Yeah.
anybody. you
Right.
know?
Right.
But I like what you're saying, to have that one person carry through. It's really important because
Yeah.
they'll come get you. The kids will
Oh
come
yeah.
get you.
Oh yeah.
That's why we're only on one, man. Whew, I don't need a tag team effort. Not be able to handle it. Let's talk a little bit about your nonprofit.
Yes.
A little bit about Ability First Coast, how you got started. What do you love about it? What opportunities has it presented for you? I think it's a really fascinating organization. So, yeah, let's dive into that.
All right. So yeah, so Ability Tree First Coast, we work with special needs families, and as a nonprofit, we come along those impacted by disability by providing what we call REST. It's an acronym for Recreation, Education, Supports, and Trainings. And the whole mission, the whole vision is that we'd be able to create this inclusive, supportive community in order for these individuals and families to feel like they could be a part of their neighborhoods, their schools, their churches, the businesses that
Mm-hmm.
they patron. And so, in order for that to happen, one of the other components is us actually working with the community. So, we
Mm,
work with the families as a family unit, and that's one of the things that separates us from some other organizations that work with just the individual. We work with
okay.
just the individual, but we also work with the family unit. We are inclusive of the family, recognizing that it's not just the individual with disabilities that has um, whose life is impacted, but the
Mm-hmm.
parents, the siblings, even extended family, or even real
Mm-hmm.
close friends who are part of their lives are impacted. And so we want to make sure that we are kind of that support system to all of them. And then
Mm-hmm.
the other component is just the community piece where we are educating, training, and presenting to the community, be it, churches,
Mm-hmm.
businesses, different organizations, clubs, anywhere that's willing to take us, even into going into the schools and being able to provide disability awareness and what that looks like. And then even creating some strategies, talking about like, what does this look like in your circle of influence?
Mm-hmm.
If it's a church, okay, so maybe you're not at a place where you can have this full on program, but what kind of culture are you setting? What's the atmosphere like when a person with disabilities comes into your church? And it
Mm-hmm.
could be, even something like the dentist or eye doctor, like how do you engage with them? How do you help your other patients and the other people feel comfortable and okay
Oh, that's a good
with that
point.
person in your space? And so, um, so those are the two components that we really look at in order to ultimately meet the vision of being able to have people get,
Huh.
interact and just develop a healthy community.
See, I didn't even think about that from a business perspective. Like your experience with going to the dentist is probably way different than mine.
Hmm.
And from the beginning, and I didn't even think about that. Like what does that mean for you? How do you have how do you have a productive dental visit like in general with a child, but especially if they have a special need or something. I didn't
Right.
even
Like sensory issues, any of that kind of
Yes.
thing. Yeah,
Oh my goodness. Well,
yeah.
we
So
went
being able,
to
go ahead.
go ahead. No, you first. You first.
Oh, I was going to say, having these places understand, like, okay, so when somebody comes in, how do we engage? You can't just like, oh, it was an unsuccessful visit. We'll try again next time. Well, no, because next time it's going to be the same thing. So you can't just keep saying the next time, the next time, the next time. Like you got to solve the issue at hand, you know?
I like that. No, I like that. I think that's super important. That's awesome. I didn't realize that you, even though like we've talked about this a many times, I didn't like think about it and like realize that that was part of ability tree. So that's
Yeah.
insightful for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
With all of these things you have going on, like your husband is a preacher or pastor. I don't know
Uh-huh.
which term you like
Pastor.
to prefer. So you have the pastor of the church. You have this organization. I know you just stopped doing some other like work with people in the community. So now you're just focused on this nonprofit. You have a daughter who's a teenager. You have a son who's a preteen. Like, how do you juggle that? How do you balance all of these things? Like, or how do you get through them? Maybe balance is a bad word, but because we're all trying to find that balance. But like, how do you do it all? How do you do it all?
I know. Well, see, I have the special privilege of having 25 hours in the day. Okay. Oh, how I wish.
I
I
know.
wish. Man, oh man. I think, two things that every new mom should get is a third arm and an extra hour in each day.
Oh my God, wouldn't that be
That's
great?
just, I'm petitioning for that.
God.
So, but, well, you saw that petition. So yeah, but I think honestly, I struggle with balance. I have for years struggled with balance because I'm being pulled in so many different directions all the time. And they all are kind of like a priority. And so because of that, I'm almost like a pendulum swing. Like it's like this, well, while I'm over here, this gets my full attention, but now everything else is kind of not getting a whole lot. Now as I'm making it, hey, I'm catching you. Oh, now I'm over here. And so I think some of the ways that I try to do it is just being intentional about my moments so that taking a moment to have a moment with my kids. So I may not be able to be with them for hours and hours on end, but the time that I am with them is going to be excellent quality of time. They have my undivided attention. I'm doing what they want to do. I'm engaging in the conversations they want to have, and letting them know that ultimately, and I go through this with my daughter because of her being 17, and obviously she's kind of in this obviously her needs are much different than when she was a little kid. So I have had to tell her time and time again, because she'll say, well, Mom, I don't want to bother you. And I have to remind her, like, you are my priority. So if I'm in the middle of something, but you need me, you will always take precedence. So even if I am truly in the middle of something and I'm not just sitting on my couch waiting, I'm waiting for my daughter. I'm sure she's going to come around at some point and talk to me. Like I'm still doing, but I have made it very clear to my kids that if you need me, I will put this on pause, or give me 5-10 minutes. Let me wrap up a little bit of whatever. And then you've got my undivided attention. So making sure that that is articulated in my relationship with my husband, with my kids, that, okay, so yeah, I'm being pulled in 50 million different directions, but ultimately you are what takes precedence, and I will stop, even if it's just for a moment, to hear what you have to say.
I like that.
Yeah.
I think that balance is a funny word, because I think day to day that changes,
Yeah.
what.
Yeah.
Like we're all like, oh, how do you find balance? You don't really ever. It is like a pendulum. It's like it's a scale. It's a bell curve.
Yes. Yes.
I think
Yes.
every day that bell curve is different where you are on it.
Yep. Yep.
Oh
Well,
my
one
goodness.
thing I was just thinking, one thing that we do is we have dinner together every day.
Yeah.
Like that is, so no matter what's going on in our day, like we have dinner time together, and we talk about what is one high and one low in
Oh,
our day.
good. I like that.
So, and even if it's been a terrible day, find something. And I have a moody teenager, so let's be
Yeah,
real.
for real. I'm like,
There's some
ooh.
days she's like, nothing good's happened today. I'm like, okay. I'm like, did you see your boyfriend? Yeah. Okay, there
Oh
you
my
go.
gosh, she has a
Is that
boyfriend.
high? I mean, are you happy that you got to see him today? Can we take that? You know. So
Oh, jeez.
but nonetheless, like we are intentional of like finding a high, even if you've had a really, really bad day. Is there something that you can
Oh
like,
man.
find in the midst, no matter how small it may be. And even if we have family over, if we have my kids' friends over, anybody who's there
Hmm.
during dinner time, everybody is involved in it. So
The one high,
everybody
one
gets
low.
asked,
Love
what is
that.
their one high, what is their one low? So yeah.
See, I think that's a good idea. I think sometimes we take for granted, I'm a firm believer in everything is a gift,
Hmm.
get something out of everything. So regardless of
Yeah.
if it's good, bad, ugly, you learn something, right? So
Yeah.
I like that. Now, this is not a question that I prefaced you with, but what's it like having your daughter date? I feel like that would drive, like, I would
We
be
may
so.
need another podcast for that.
Okay. All right, we'll save that for later because I'm like, I didn't
Oh,
realize she was like, I mean, duh, she's 17. I don't know why I didn't think
I
about that.
know.
Oh, we're
Yeah,
gonna have to talk. Is that fun?
it's been interesting, but we've since she was little, we've always been very intentional of keeping communication open, even if
Mm-hmm.
it's very uncomfortable. And we will actually, we're talking like since toddlerhood, we would bring up conversations that were very uncomfortable intentionally to normalize it, like it's okay to talk about these things. And so as
Yeah.
she's gotten older, holding her accountable, talking to her, about, life and what that means
Yeah.
in dating, those type of things has
Mm-hmm.
been something that has been prepared, since before middle school, probably fourth, fifth grade, when her little friends were having little boyfriends. I'm like,
Oh
mm-mm,
gosh.
ain't happening. But we would talk about it, like, so you see your friend in fourth grade, anyway, your friend in fourth grade is now crying because this little boy broke up with her. Like,
Yeah.
do you want that to be you? No, I don't want that to be me. Okay, so let's talk about that. So it was that kind of a thing all
I like
along.
that.
So by the time we got to where she was able to date, at the
Man.
age to date, like, it was, she knew kind of what our expectations of what we would be looking at, for her. And of course, I mean, she's going to pick who she's going to pick, but then, like, who do you want? Like, truly,
Mm-hmm.
what are the
Yeah.
character building, um, foundations that you want in a
Mm-hmm.
person, and,
Yeah.
going with that. So, yeah.
They should teach a class on that in school.
Mm.
For real. That and accounting. Why don't we learn more accounting?
I tell my husband that all the time. Like, you need to just go into school and offer, because my husband does financial advising. Like, you need to go in and do like finance 101. We actually do that with my daughter's friends. We talk to them
Awesome.
yeah, any of them that want to listen. We
Oh,
like
that is so.
do.
I wish I paid more attention to my account. I took an accounting class in high school thinking that, like, oh, I'm not good with numbers, like basic math, great, but like accounting, the way it works, it's like my brain does just, the synapses do not fire that way.
Yeah.
And
Mm-mm.
I wish I would have just like stuck with it because now I'm like, oh, I gotta find an accountant. I don't know what I'm doing. What's happening in the world? What do these numbers mean? Makes my head hurt. Like I can't, like, ugh, I just can't.
Yep.
Oh man. Now I know it's been a minute since you've had a baby, but
Yeah.
throughout your parenting, from like the time you were pregnant, or if you remember anything specifically, or if you any tidbit of advice that you have received that was unsolicited, because we get a lot as moms. Is there anything you find particularly useless? Like someone's like, "Oh, you need this, or you should do that," or you might even have more than the average. But like,
Yeah.
what was like the most useless information you've received about motherhood in general?
Um. So I think looking at I'm trying to think some useless information. Well, one thing, and I don't
Ugh.
know, maybe the medical community is going to come and like attack me for this, but they said don't eat lunch meat while you're pregnant.
Oh yeah.
Like you can't have a
Mm-hmm.
sub or that kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. And I was like, that's what I wanted. So that's what I had, and I had a friend who was pregnant at the same time as me, and she's like, I can't believe you're eating lunch meat. I'm like, I can't believe you're drinking caffeinated sodas. Let's not talk here. So it's like,
It's
so you get
true.
those things. And
So
I
true.
know there's so many different perspectives, right, of like what to do and not to do during pregnancy. But I think some of the useless information that I got was when my son was 3, so toddlerhood, we had an occupational therapist tell us that we had to force my son to choose which hand he was going to write with, because something about activating the brain when they decide which hand is going to be their dominant hand. Because my son
Interesting.
is really ambidextrous, so he can use both fairly equally. And she literally wanted us during one of our meetings to decide which hand he was going to write with,
At
so
3.
that we can help him along with triggering his brain. And I was like, well, the normal neurological like developmental milestone is between 3 and 5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my son at that point was still like a 1 year old. So why am I expecting something of a 1 year old just because he's chronologically 3? So I
Mm.
think that was kind of a thing, like where feeling the pressure, especially because she's an occupational therapist, so shouldn't she know better? And having that type of pressure as a parent from a medical community. And I know there's a bazillion hot topics out there on,
Mm-hmm.
that come up, should I or shouldn't I feel pressured to do or not to do. And I know
Mm-hmm.
that was one of the things that was was what we struggled with. And probably one of the other things is just that, oh, your kid's going to always be happy. He has Down syndrome. And I know I mentioned that before, and that was like, funny and all, but like the first thing my OB said to me when he came in after there was a possibility that just I had
Uh-huh.
Down syndrome, he sat there on the windowsill and started telling me about his childhood and his
Oh,
neighbor
jeez.
who had Down syndrome and how fun he was right then. And so here I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to have this really sweet, funny, lovable, happy kid. And so when he started having behaviors, would be aggressive or just
Mm.
refuse tasks over and over and over again, I was like, I don't understand what this is. I didn't think he was supposed to be, having
Right.
these type of behaviors. So I think that, and that was kind of a time will tell type of
Yeah.
situation, but apparently that was pretty useless information.
Well, I just think it's interesting that you would kind of, I don't know how to say this in a politically correct way, but like you would reduce a human to just being one, facet. Like we all have
Yeah.
emotions, like just because
Yeah.
you have a different chromosome count isn't going to change the fact that you're going to have
Right.
emotion. We're
Right.
I don't, that to me is like, okay, like I get what he was trying to do for you, but at the same time, it's like, uh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know he was trying to make me feel better, like it's going to be
Yeah.
great.
So,
And I mean, don't get me wrong, my son is known as the class clown. He loves making people
oh, thank
laugh.
you.
He is incredibly tender and sweet.
Mm-hmm.
He's inclusive. Like he wants everybody to be involved, almost to the point of bossiness. Um, but
He's a leader.
right, right, exactly. But you're right. I mean, he experiences everything that any other 11-year-old kid's going to experience.
Yeah.
So,
It's just interesting that you'd think somebody who, I mean, I know that OB is differently. They're all different doctors, but it's like you'd think that you'd have some kind of like basic psychology. I don't know, whatever. Again, what do I know? I feel like I don't know much most of the time. So, what about like something you wish you were told? Like, I know for me personally, like everybody's like, oh, get this swing, get the baby bottle warmer, get this, get that. And I just had this like moment in, when I was like, I'm not going to buy anything till I meet this kid. And I know what his personality is. Like, and then we end up, Declan loved to be rocked to sleep. And so we get the swing and he doesn't even like the swing. I'm like, what the heck is this? Right. So was there anything that you wish people would have told you about motherhood that they didn't tell you about motherhood? Like secret in the closet, like.
Yeah. I think, and I don't know if this is Hollywood that talks, but that pregnancy is not as easy, and it's not always a fun experience. Like you see a lot of times where people are like, "Oh, look, my baby's moving," but like, really understanding that morning sickness really sucks. It's not a theory. It does. Going through like just all that process of it and understanding that there are real challenges, there are real medical challenges that can come about. I think I would have much preferred more of a raw reality conversation about pregnancy, at least so I could have felt a little bit more prepared for it. Knowing how breastfeeding worked, I had no clue at all. And I didn't have anyone, like none of the doctors or nurses educated me on it. After my daughter was born, didn't. And then when my son was born, didn't until they recognized that I wanted to breastfeed, because he was in the NICU right after he was born. And so they had to do an NG tube to help make sure he was being fed. But I was like, well, I want to breastfeed him. And so that's when they started helping me a little bit with that.
That's so crazy.
But,
that's so crazy.
I think that would have been nice to understand a little bit more.
I would agree 100% with that too. Like, and then another thing that for me, like, and I've talked about this in other podcasts, but it's so mind blowing. Like, until I took a birth class, and no one's told you, like, you have to like birth your placenta too, like, it doesn't matter if you have a C-section or a vaginal birth, you still got to get the placenta out. And nobody told you that. And like, till
right.
that,
right.
To your point about breastfeeding, when I delivered Deck, I happened to be at a very breastfeeding, like they wanted you to breastfeed your baby. This was in Dallas.
Okay.
At the time. And so I literally had like all the nurses coming in all the time, like helping me, like, oh, it's like, oh, hands on, no, you gotta do it like this. And I'm like, because you like take the breastfeeding like class or whatever, but it's like the whole art form. And I'm like, oh man, like I didn't know this,
Right.
Your friend,
and then feeling like a failure because you didn't, or because it's not successful.
Yeah. And you don't realize, and to Declan, you might have had some issues too with like latching. Like Declan had a tongue tie, a lip and tongue tie. So it was like fall off every like 3 to 5 seconds. And that is so frustrating. And then you're like, don't give him a bottle yet till he latches appropriately. And you're just like,
yeah.
I mean, it's like, it's exhausting. It's too much.
Yeah. Well, one of the other things that I didn't realize was postpartum, that it can truly happen to anyone.
Oh.
Like I thought there was like you would be predisposed type of a thing, and maybe you are. I don't know. I don't know the medical aspect of it, but just that it really, you don't have to have a mental health diagnosis pre-pregnancy to experience postpartum, that it can really happen to anyone. And like, I'm a Christian, and so I didn't think that it could happen to Christians like that, either, because I thought, so it was a wake-up call for me with my son when I was experiencing that. Now, mind you, I was dealing with it hormonally, but also the fact that I have now a child with special needs. So I think that kind of just was all balled up. But I think for any mom to be ready and okay with it.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I'm starting to feel this way, recognize it for what it is, and for their circle of family and friends to be ready to come alongside
I
them.
love that you said that because so I was raised Catholic, and I like to consider myself like a very faithful person with a very strong spirituality. And I have my own beliefs, and I know there's a higher power out there, and I have a lot of faith. So I think sometimes we think with a strong faith base, like, what Christian, what Muslim, whatever you are, like you have that like connection to God, but sometimes you don't realize that you're still human, like,
Yes.
and you're only
Yes.
individual. And like what you're saying is, so like I started to see a therapist before I gave birth because I was afraid of getting postpartum depression, and I already had
Okay.
like anxiety and OCD and all this stuff. And then I was like, I'm alone in Dallas. I have no friends. I have no family. Like I can't, if I'm going to be alone with this baby, I need to be mentally prepared.
Yes.
And my mom was abusive, and she had depression and was like bipolar and all this stuff. And I was like, I can't let that be me. Like let it what it is, but what can
Right.
I do to minimize my exposure? And I was like, I literally like prayed all the
Hmm.
time, please don't let this happen, because I'm all alone. And Dominic, my husband, he traveled like almost 200 days a year, so like
Right.
literally by myself. So I love that you said that, because I think it is so important to know that your body goes through such a hormonal shift.
So huge.
And then like what you're talking about, we actually, so my husband's adopted, and we did a genetic test before we had Declan, because I was like, we don't know your genealogy. We don't know what your history is. This kid could have a million different things. And I was like, honestly, I got to mentally prepare myself. Like if he's
Yeah.
going to have syndrome, I need to, and it's still, the test could still come back, and he could still have been born with
Sure.
some kind of disability or mental
Right.
illness, whatever, doesn't matter. But I was like, I need to, for my own mental well-being, need to be able to plan for this, because,
Yeah. Hmm.
and so
Sure.
we have a healthy, beautiful boy. I'm so fortunate. But the mental health aspect, I think, is something that is underplayed, because exactly what you're saying, like even the strongest women can succumb to it. And
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with that. It's,
Right. Absolutely not. Yeah.
you grow a human in you, and now it's
Yeah.
out of you. Like,
Yes.
hello, ladies, you grew
Yeah.
a human. Oh man, like,
You're entitled to have a few moments of like, yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
it's okay to not feel because you have a whole new normal as a mom. I literally
Yes.
told my husband the other day, it's like the difference between like the parent who doesn't give birth or carry the child, and and the one who does, is there is a huge amount of mental, physical, spiritual change
Hmm.
happens in a second. As soon as that
Yes.
test is positive, there's so much change, and you can't control it. As a woman, you change like that.
Yes.
You can't drink alcohol. You can't like go out and lift heavy logs and be a lumberjack, or like, you have to do a million and one different things differently to try to have a healthy human. And that's like before
Yes.
genetics comes into it. Like, let's just
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
hope they,
Right. Right. Right.
let's just hope for a breathing kid, like, and
Yes.
the way, and then there's that, I know people who have lost a child, or like
Hmm.
their baby had like spina bifida, and like, you're just like, there's so
Yeah.
many things that can happen. Like, you're lucky to have a beautiful breathing organism at the end of it. So let's
Yeah.
just think about that, ladies. Like, it's okay.
Yes.
I just thank you for
Yes.
bringing that up, because it's so important. Like, the mental health to me is so important,
Sure. Oh yeah, for sure.
and it's like the hormones, man. Hormones are crazy. Let's be real here.
Hmm.
Is there anything we didn't talk about that you'd like to cover? Anything you want to add about children, or that are born? I'm sorry, children with disabilities. I always feel like I'm saying it wrong, so I'm sorry if I am.
Nope. You're doing good.
Thanks. I try really hard to be politically correct, and it's like not my strength. Like everything
Yeah.
comes out like
But when you try
misarticulated.
so hard, you end up offending. You're going to offend someone somewhere somehow. So,
This is true. I can be very offensive indirectly. Ask my husband. I offend him all the
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to send you this video I made, and I totally like make fun of him because he's British and your heritage is British, as you told me.
Yes.
And it's totally like I'm just so mean to him sometimes. Like, do you know the book The Pout Pout Fish? Have you ever read? Oh my god, you got it. It's amazing. Just
Okay.
So it's called The Pout Pout Fish, and it does like a Dr. Seussy kind of thing in it. And
Okay.
it goes, pout pout fish with the pout pout face. So I spread the dreary wearies all over the place. Blub. And so he's like driving and he's like moping, and I just start videoing him and singing pout pout fish. And he's like, that's so rude. And I'm like, well, you are like a negative Nancy all the time. I'm so terrible.
That's
So he's like,
hilarious.
well, I'm awful. I'll just text you the videos. You can laugh at them.
Yes, please do.
I'm an awful
Oh my
wife.
word.
But
That's awesome.
anyway, is there anything else you'd like to add? Is there anything else, any unsolicited information you'd like to give, or something that you wish to share about the community, the disabled?
Yeah. I think just a couple, like not to walk the journey alone. If you, well, any parent at all, like any mama, and I think, as twisted and I don't know, toxic as Facebook and other social media can be sometimes, I think, what it has offered and what it has done is be able to bring communities of people together for, moms being able to come together, special needs families to be able to come together, those type of things. So I think it's so important to recognize that you don't have to figure it out on your own. There are others who are going through it or have gone through it. And it's important to make sure that you are getting connected to those people, to those organizations that are able to be that support system. And for special needs parents, not blaming yourself or your spouse for your child's situation. Even if there's even if genetically there was a possibility, a probability, like your child was predisposed because of your genetics, still don't blame yourself or your spouse, because blame, it turns into shame, and then shame is a really dark place. It tells you that there's something wrong with you, and that's going to translate into there's something wrong with my child, and you don't want that that for yourself when you're raising this child, and you don't want that for your child where they feel like they're less than because of whatever it is, that the situation that they may be in, because your child is designed exactly the way they're supposed to be. I don't know if you have ever heard of the law of unintended consequence. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
The law of okay. So I've been learning a little bit more about this, and it's pretty fascinating. The law of unintended consequence, it's unforeseen consequences or outcomes that was not the intended purpose. So so let's take ability tree, for example. Starting ability tree was an unintended consequence. I did not have my son so that I could one day have ability tree.
Okay.
I had my son, and because of my son and his disabilities, I then came to a place where the unforeseen thing that happened was that I started ability tree.
Yeah.
It can be, that I didn't have I didn't, marry my husband so that I could have this, that, and the other. But because I married my husband, these are the things that came about because of it. And so looking at your child, any child, having your child, there's going to be these unplanned, unforeseen things that happen.
Yeah.
But those things is what's going to create your character. It's going to develop who you are as a person, and it could potentially, direct your path and what your
Oh,
plan and
love,
mission is for your life and your
love that.
calling.
I love that. I would 100% say my son is the reason that I started writing and the reason that I want to do this podcast. 100%. Like, I could totally follow.
Yeah,
Like, you don't know what's going to happen until
absolutely.
you're going to do until you
Right.
try. But
Exactly. I mean, you didn't have
yeah,
your son so that you could have a podcast
no, of
or
course
so
not.
that you'd, be publishing books. That was not why you had a kid.
No.
But the unforeseen consequence or situation is that these things came
Oh,
about
that is
because
cool.
of this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. And because of my son and a few other people in my life, I seek to learn more about things
Yes.
I do not know. And she can tell
Yeah.
by my floundering around how to say differently abled or person with disabilities, like I'm trying
Yeah.
to understand something
Sure.
that is a little bit foreign to me, but I think it's important. So, and
Yeah.
because of my son, and because I feel we were so lucky at the way I wasn't supposed to have kids, all that stuff, blah, blah, blah. We feel fortunate. I think it's important that he knows how other people might be a little bit different than him, but they're still capable. And
Yes.
I think that it's incumbent on me as a parent to be inclusive in as many ways as possible. I don't have to understand everything. I don't have to be an expert on anything. I have to be
That's right.
I have to be open.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the most important thing we can teach our kids. Like, I'm a big believer in love. Like, in the Bible, we'll take it back to religion, there's like more passages about love than anything else. And I think I'm right about that. I believe I read that somewhere. Could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure. And so what does that what that tells me as a person is that the greatest thing we're called to do is love. And we're not
Mhm.
going to be perfect at it. But we're humans. Like, it doesn't matter.
Right.
We're going to fall and we're going to drop the ball. But the idea is that every day we come out with an open heart and from a loving perspective and a loving position. And that's how we make the world a better place.
Yep.
How we create what we want for our children. And if we can demonstrate that by our own actions, I think they're more likely to pick up on it. That's
Right.
that's all I know, guys. That's all I
Love.
know. Yeah, right. Oh, self-love, love of other people, loving people you don't like definitely.
Yes.
Sometimes it's hard to, like, I butt heads with so many of my friends, but they make me better because they make me more curious and more well read or researched, and it just challenging a perspective, I think, is really important because you can learn more about where your own roots are grounded.
Right. Well, and it helps you solidify what your belief system is and where you
Yes.
stand, and
Yeah,
it just helps ground you in that.
100%. And sometimes we need to update our belief systems or ideas about life. And I definitely have adapted mine as I've grown up and become more aware, self-aware, more conscientious, thoughtful, more intentional, like all of those things. And I would reckon that you probably have done the same on your path as well.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you wouldn't have this awesome foundation. And, obviously you and your husband have worked very hard at your marriage, and it's
Yeah.
rooted in faith, which I think is really helpful. So, I mean, my husband keeps talking about going to mass, but I'm like, that was supposed to be like our Lenten thing, was to go to mass. We're the worst Catholics ever. We'll get there for Easter. So terrible. Anyway, that's me on a tangent. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us today?
No, I think we covered a lot. Yeah,
A lot of
covered a
stuff.
lot of stuff today.
Well, thank you so much for being part of our podcast, Joanne.
Absolutely.
I'm the mom who knows nada. My name is Brianna. And until next time, have fun learning all the things you didn't know you needed to know.
Absolutely.
That's my tagline out.